Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this wonderful introduction. Well, first of all, everybody is able to see my screen?
Yes, Adrian.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, so well, today we would like to introduce you to these urban solutions from the Netherlands. The goal of this presentation today will be to share a few lessons learned and how to apply or implement them. Well, I believe that every solution must be the answer to a local context. Most of what we see today in Dutch planning is actually a response to its geography, to its culture. And this is the reason why I would like to emphasize two main aspects that define the Dutch planning philosophy, we could say. One are water-related aspects, such as how the natural solutions can coexist with urban water challenges, nature-based solutions, building with nature, the program that we call the Room for the Rivers, and social participation, of course. And the other aspect is related to mobility, specifically to the bicycle. The first concept that we would like to introduce then is this notion of context, how basically the physical context and the cultural context can trigger urban development. In our country, we could say that the Dutch physical context is strongly defined by its topography and the connection with the sea. It's a flat land where within the dike rings, we have the 26% of the land below sea level. Apart from that, 60% of the country is susceptible of flooding. And in that territory, all what you see in these two blue colors, the blue and the light blue, 9 million people are living, representing the 70% of the Dutch GDP. Of course, this means that in the past, this is a picture in 1953, where this dramatic event occurred in the Netherlands. It was a big flood. Peak happened during the night, and the storm surprised many people in their sleep. This is to understand what we call the water footprint in the Netherlands. Of course, climate change affects us all, but the effects of climate change differ strongly from one country or region to another. Coming back to this idea of context. For the Netherlands, we could say that several reports from the past years have shown negative impacts for the Netherlands with extreme weather events such as increased temperatures, heat waves, drought, and of course the rising of sea level. In the Netherlands, the Room for the River program is a government design plan intended to address flood protection, master landscaping, and the improvement of environmental conditions in areas surrounding in Netherlands rivers. This project was active from 2006 till 2017. And the main goal was to manage higher water levels in rivers by lowering the levels of flood plains next to them, as we can see in this picture, creating water buffers, relocating levees, increasing the depth of side channels, and the construction of flood bypasses as well. It also contemplates the possibility of creating solid platforms to develop new activities in these floodplains as well. Mitigation, we could say, is the best form of adaptation to climate change. And this is, we could say, one of the most important statements that we have in the Netherlands to deal with this. This is an image of the Massland barrier that serves as it's a complex, an engineering, very, very large engineering complex, which purpose is keeping Rotterdam safe from sea, while at the same time is keeping the port open. Of course, this is all these years of developing of history, all these engineering interventions in the territory. We could say on a first level of urban structure, the water in the Netherlands defines the urban tissue, different urban and rural patterns. So when we refer to this term, the water footprint is not the typical engineering approach where we define a specific consumption amount of water for agriculture. The concept of water footprint for us is related to this mark led by water in the territory, the cultural aspect of water, which is also very, very important. As a member state of the European Union, the Netherlands is committed to the European goal of achieving climate neutrality, as the ambassador explained, by 2050, and to the European target of net domestic reduction of at least 55% in greenhouse emissions. The question is, of course, how to achieve this. Well, after this brief introduction, we'll try to grab some main lessons from the past that we would like to share with you to understand why or how. The first lesson, we'll try to reduce these lessons to 5 main lessons. The first one we could say is to work or to bring always the water culture to society, to incorporate it to the culture. This is an example of a Dutch painter, Jan van Goyen. He's one of the most gifted landscapists in the Netherlands during the early 17th century. We believe it is very important to incorporate the culture of water, to accept water in urban areas and to enjoy its presence. We see in many cities worldwide that sometimes the city is giving their backs to the rivers, ignoring sometimes its presence. So it's very important to embrace and to learn how to live with water. Of course, fluence was key. The second is to work with the natural system. This is a very, very important notion, because when we understand how nature works, we can use it to increase resilience, to design a better sustainable urban landscape. As we can see in this parking area under the dunes in the Dutch coastline. The third lesson, and I would say because of my personal experience, is one of the main lessons that came together with the Dutch polder model, that is the stakeholder participation in the decision-making process. The way that we do it in the Netherlands is very horizontal. Most of the society can be involved in this process and to really take part on this decision-making process. This is very, very important for long-term planning, for to go beyond sometimes political periods of time, for instance. Another important aspect also related to this is the long-term water management. We'll say mostly the long-term part of it is key. This is an image representing the Delta model that we developed in the Netherlands. This model consists of 3 national programs and 6 regional programs, including safety standards, water supply, spatial management, etc. And lastly, I would say that this could be also a trademark for the Netherlands, is thinking out of the box. Sometimes it's very surprising to see that when you think that everything is solved, the Dutch are always bringing a new concept, a bold concept that provide innovative solutions to deal with these aspects. This was the case. This is one beautiful example in the Dutch coast as well. It was an experiment, the CENN engine, where using the forces, the currents, the sea currents, adding some sediments in specific areas, very well planned. Naturally, it was building. We introduced the term building with nature here. This artificial, if you want, natural dash artificial peninsula. This was the final result. Still there. Thinking out of the box. Well, regarding the cultural context and regarding the second aspect that I wanted to emphasize, I brought this short story about the bicycle. Because it's not just about the artifact itself, but how something like this can trigger or can define our urban planning. Well, we must tell you about the bike, not only as a transport again, but as an urban catalyzer. To give an ideological, philosophical context, we have to talk about Calvinism, maybe, in our culture, whose basis is equally between people and austerity in general. This is an image of Queen Juliana and Prince Bernhard in the 30s. During the First War, the use of bicycle grew in the Netherlands. But then between the 50s and the 60s, car sales soared. In reference to the Marshall Plan, modern city models, and other international, let's say, aspects. This situation, as you can see in these pictures, led to massive protests. In 71, more than 3 people were killed by cars, 450 were children, and well, anyway, social engagement made it possible. It's not just that because of the Netherlands, it's a flat land and it's easy to cycle. It's very important to understand how the culture or social engagement can also define a path to be followed. From this social and political consensus after these events that happened on the place and the use of the bicycle, the government began to develop the infrastructure for the bicycle. Little by little, an impressive network of separate bike lanes, junctions, signs, bridges, etc. was created. Here you can see in these two examples also how can we understand, how can we see the different users for the bicycle. In the Netherlands, everybody is cycling, the children, we use it for fast flow, to want to go from A to B very quickly, but also for slow traffic. And it's very important to understand this, to see what's the impact on urban planning, what's the result of understanding this complexity streets. These concepts and the different users transform in a way the infrastructure and the public space. And for us as urban planners is the best possible synergy that we could seek. This interaction defines also the urban tissue as the water did in our country. We can see its transformative power in these images in our cities, livable, happier and healthier cities. For all this, the Netherlands identifies nature-based solutions, ecosystem-based approaches, sustainable mobility and renewable energy as the sectors mostly resulting in co-benefits for both adaptation and mitigation. This is very important. This is a very important statement that was released after the COP meeting not so long ago. In our view, these are also the parameters and tools that we reshape our territories and cities. After this, let's say, focus on these two aspects, we have to say that in our way of understanding the city as a single organism, we agree with this multi-dimensional approach. Here we understand that we cannot debate about the city only from one or two aspects, let's say from the bicycle or water-related aspect, but through its complexity. This is very important to think in multiple layers and to bring all this complexity together. We have to talk about inclusion, security, ecosystems, of course, climate adaptation, health, identity, etc. We have the chance to work in the city of Batumi, also together with my colleague Dirikian. We did this also with the collaboration of Wetlands International. And just to give you an example of how we proceed very briefly with the city, the first was to make a quick scan of the city to identify areas of opportunity. With that, we created priorities and we defined two areas to develop. What the first one was the green, we call it the green boulevard, that today is actually not so green, but the idea was to transform this boulevard and to better connect this area with the sea, because now we have this lake in between. You don't see the entire picture, but behind the lake we have the coast and the sea. So what we did was we proposed to transform this area into a linear park and to connect through two pedestrian bridges over the lake and to connect to the coast. Of course, with that we improve the conditions of and the quality of urban space. We work with resilience, we infiltrate water, we create a better ecosystems, urban ecosystems, and we make it better for visitors. This is just an impression of how this can be transformed. And the second, we defined as an area of opportunity the port area, where the strategy was to bring or to create a creative industry district and a coastal park. And this was more or less the result of that plan, where we transform what you see here in this light purple, an area that is in between zone with highways going around and some old factories and abandoned shipyards. The idea is to transform this, and with and using the synergy of this intervention to create a new urban coastal park next to the port, as you can see in this color zone, using, of course, nature-based solutions, building with nature, as we explained earlier in our Dutch examples. For Kutaisi, we've been investigating a little bit. Of course, we would like to hear from you. What are your challenges? What are your ideas? This is a small scheme of the city. We are aware that you have this river flowing from the direction north-south. We identify some areas for possible zoning in an industrial area, tourist destinations, the city center, where the railway stations are located, where we can create also a connection perhaps another green corridor for biodiversity, potential youth districts, etc.
Yeah, so I work in the Netherlands at the university and also for an engineering firm. And as you know, the Netherlands is famous for a way of working with water. And what Adrian was telling you was look at your own area and define what makes it specific, what makes it unique. I mean, and build on that your master plan. So I'm really happy to hear that from the mayor that you are working on a master plan, that you already included green city measures and also smart city measures. So I think that fits well. So as you know, and that I also saw it last week when I was in Georgia, in Tbilisi and in Batumi, cities are growing. So where today we have only 3.5 billion people living in cities, in 2030, that will be 60%. So it will be rapidly increasing. That brings challenges with it. Maybe due to Corona and the COVID situation, maybe this will go more slower, because I also know that from friends, they want to move out of the city and live in the rural area again. But I think in general, the trend is that more and more people will live in cities. And we also know that 90% of the disasters are related to water. And that means not only flooding, so your city is also located along a river, but you also have flooding, of course, from the rainfall. And nowadays, if you look at most of the cities, it's very much paved, a lot of concrete. As an example, the Batumi Boulevard, you know, that's very sensible for flooding due to rainfall. But what we see also in the Netherlands, and I see in most of the big Asian cities, is that they are sinking. They are going lower and lower because they take out all the groundwater, and the land surface is going lower, which is really a big threat if you look at sea level rise. That's something, luckily, I think not happening in Kutaisi, but I think heat stress might be. So what we saw in Batumi is that the heat stress, so that is the days in the year that it's too warm to go outside, and even people die, particularly elderly, when they get these heat waves. That number of heat waves will increase. So in Batumi, it's about 13 days in a year, and that will increase. And they come along exactly in the tourism season. So yeah, and if a tourist doesn't want to go out with 40 degrees, but you can do something about it. So that means you can do like biodiversity measures, but I will come to that. So this is a picture of Bangkok, where you see how it was in 1971, and this is just 2002. I do not have a more recent picture, but I guess that the city is much more expanded. And if you look at Tbilisi, I saw they are constructing already on top of the hills. It's also expanding. It's rapidly growing, and that is, of course, normal. It's not something you should stop or something, but you should take it into account and realize that your vulnerability to water issues will increase. Sea level rise, change in the patterns of the rain, longer periods of drought, what I mentioned, are all things are predicted already due to climate change and actually already happening. So in the Netherlands also it's happening. We have last springs, we had much more dry periods than we ever had before. We have rain. In the past, we calculated our sewage system for a rainfall of 20 millimeters in an hour, where we have seen already rainfall events of 100 millimeters in an hour. So that means that our sewage systems cannot cope with it. So we have to do things already now. So all these pressures from water, it's of course for each household, and this is 5 dimensions from the Asian Development Bank, where you see the impact of water on our daily life. And so my message to you is, if you look at your urban livability, if you look at your urban planning for your city, take water into account, and not only the existence of water, but also if there is no water, like dry periods, maybe we can keep the water longer. So you have not, you can use the water for irrigation to keep the biodiversity in your city. So for this, we have solutions. we have what we call, and the World Bank calls, is the blue and green infrastructure. That means try to keep in your city forest, wildlife, the river. Don't make it everything concrete, so just the blue of the green, and also blue measures. So how is your stormwater, your sewage system, your drainage organized? How are you protected against rainfall, flooding, or flooding from the river? So those, and I would like to show, so this is a bit high level. I would like to show further on in the presentation examples how you could imply that at street level. But you start, before you are at street level, you start, of course, with a vision. So it's nice to hear that you and your master plan already have a vision on greening your city. And you have already a vision on smarting your city. What I teach the students is often the water sensitive city concept. And that means making your city physically attractive to keep it, the water, to solve the water issues in the future. But that is too narrow-minded. What it actually means is you also can co-create things for your on mobility, in the social sphere. You can do more than just the water issue. So what you see, it's a bit blurry picture, but this is Hoboken in New York, where we designed a dike to protect it from the river floodings, or it's the coastal floodings. But this dike is also a cycling road. It's also a nice park for people to go out. It's also a building where you have concerts. So the dike is not just a dike. It's not just to keep the water out. It also serves the people who live there. And you cannot, you can imagine that you need to know what kind of people are living there, because you don't want to make a children playground if there only lives old people. Or you want to make a park with a stepped approach where old people live because they don't care, they cannot walk all those steps. So you want to adjust your concept for flood protection in this case to the people who live there, and for that you also want to involve stakeholders. I hope this is clear. If not, please ask questions, raise your hand, that's really fine to me. So from a water perspective, we see threats from sea level rise. That's not the case in Kutaisi, but in the Netherlands it is. But mainly we will focus on the precipitation, the rainfall, the river. And I will show you what you can do in your city in case of heavy rainfall. So in the left side, you see a peak of rainfall and how it is discharged over time. What you want is to bring this peak lower, because then you can cope with it better. So therefore you have three concepts. One is to store, it's like a sponge, and the rain will be kept inside the sponge. The other is retention, so you can squeeze a bit out, slowly it will drip out of the sponge when it gets full, and then it will be kept for a while, it's just delaying. Or you can discharge it, so you can get the water as quick as possible out of your system. And this is always necessary to prevent wet feet, because you don't want to have 30 centimeters of water on your street level, or like in Asia where they drive a lot of on their scooters, motorcycles. It should not come above the pipe, because if it's above the pipe, the motorcycle will not work. So what you could do in the past, what we did mostly was you bring the rain what comes in, you run it off quickly, you drain it directly into your sewage system, and then you discharge it to a river. Nowadays, we think that that is still possible for some locations, but you want to do more and better, also in combination with that biodiversity wish and greening wish. So you can delay it by infiltration, by have a retention, you can store it in surface water, and then drain it to discharge. So this is a little bit different concept, and you can look above the surface, you can look at buildings, so you can green the roof. You can look at the surface to create wadis. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept, But in desert areas, you often have rivers, but they only float when you have rainfall. So this is say a lower place in your street where water can go in when you have a rainfall event. In the other days of the year, it's dry. There's nothing inside. It's a wadi. And you have also rain gardens. Rain gardens are just flowers, trees along your street where you also can keep water. You can store it there and delay. And of course, you have your solutions below the surface, like pipes, crates, water storing under your surface. I will show some examples in the next slide. So here you see all kinds of possibilities nowadays. What we see is green roofs with solar panels. We see here even water retention on your roof, so you can keep the water here for a while before you drain it to your sewage systems, to your pipes. You have here like swales where water just can be stored in the water. You also have like how it's named, the rain catching parts along the buildings. And also you can use underground structures to store water. So what my message is to you is that it's not just about water, because it means if you have more green, it's also good for the people. It's more green, less heat stress, so the well-being of people will improve. It also improves the biodiversity, the eco values, the water quality, yeah, so the environment, what was mentioned. Yeah, it's also food for insects and birds. And that is also very important, especially in the Netherlands, of course, that the risk of extreme rain events will be lower. So you also help the safety. Now, at building levels, you can think about this kind of roofs. This is, of course, an extreme example, but it is going to be constructed in Utrecht. But it greens your city. This is at street level an example where this is a new built area, redeveloped, where you see here surface water. So they draw also, they made also room for surface water. And you see also that water from the roofs, they go on the street and just floats along it to here, for instance. And this is a very particular square from Rotterdam city, where you see, this is a dry day, you see blue sky, not often in the Netherlands, but here, nice blue sky. People enjoying this park, this square. But when it's raining, then the rain from the roofs, from the street is all stored in this square. So now you can play basketball, but when it's a rain event, there is quite a layer of water here. And then it's slowly released to the sewage system again afterward. So it's a concept where you do not get directly all the rainfall into your sewage system, which will make it flooding. So there are also, of course, challenges, of course, if you look at such kind of things. So if you want to make the very particular roof full of water, I mean, your building needs to be strong enough. So myself, I have a dacha, and the dacha is quite old one. I really would like, because I'm lecturing about green roofs, etc. So I would like to have a green roof on the dacha, but unfortunately, my building is not strong enough, so I cannot do that. So I've now decided to take out some of the concrete around the building and make it more green there. But also, if you want to construct such a square, like the square in Rotterdam I showed you, this water square, yeah, you need to have room for it, of course. There should be no other constructions there or no other functions. And you can imagine in a densely populated country like the Netherlands, every spot has a function. So you need to discuss with stakeholders, etc., to come to a good solution for that. I can imagine that also in Kutaisi, this is the case, or Tbilisi also, where quite a lot of people live, where every spot has a function. What also important to take into account is, of course, what is underground. You cannot always see that, but our boulevard in Batumi we worked on, yeah, I'm for sure there are cables, for sure there is maybe sewage pipes, but we do not know from our satellite images where they are. So we might have planted now in our design a tree on top of a cable. Yeah, that's of course not what you want. So it's very important to know, and I know that is a challenge for every city, to know where are your cables, where are your pipes, how is your underground infrastructure organized. So my message to you is, start with a vision. Like Batumi has green and vital. I hear you also have green. It's good to start with a vision for your city, which fits also in your city. So look at your footprint, how Adrian calls it. Look at your footprint as a city and define what makes your city your city. And then know your city well. And so I teach my students always about city as text. I'm not sure if you are familiar with it, with city as text. That means go into your city and read your city like a text. Normally you take a book and you read, but go out to your street where you want to change things and read your city. So what are people doing there? How are people moving? What kind of economy is there? Are they old? Are they young? This kind of thing. So I give my students often an assignment, and in Rotterdam city, they have to go to that street and they have to sit there half a day, just observing what is happening there. So reading their city. So that's a call I would like to do to you. It's not a waste of time, actually. It's very interesting to see how people use the street, because it means when you design things, when you want to change things, you can take that into account. So if you see only old people, I cannot make steps. If you see a lot of young people, you should think about, oh, maybe a playground would be good. If people always move in such a way through the street, then you should not block it by constructing there something. So that is my message. And it's very important that you have your data. So the underground data, the infrastructure, what kind of people, how old are they, what type, are they very active? Do they want mountaineering, or do they want just lazy things? This kind of things you need to know. And there are different aspects you always take into your design. So if you design at very practical level, your street, make a water balance model. So if a raindrops falls into your system, how does it go through your system to the sewage, to the wastewater treatment plant? I will show in the next slide how that works. Then define your measure and think about your raindrop again. And then take into account climate scenarios. So if it will be drier, how does your system work then? If it will be more wet, how does your system work then? And define a water management plan. And same you do for spatial. So think about what Adrian said about what is your footprint? How does it look like? What are your spatial qualities? Where are the unique things in your street, what you would like to keep, or even maybe a highlight? And which things you think are not anymore in use and you could maybe reduce. But also think about the future. The water square in Rotterdam is, people like it very much. They come from abroad and want to do it, but people do not realize that it takes maintenance. It needs an whole organization to keep it clean from all the leaves from the trees around, etc. So if you design things for your street, make plans, also take into account the maintenance. So it can be over time to choose for a more expensive solution, but in the lifetime, if you take the life cycle analysis, it might be cheaper at the end because you do not need to replace it every 4 or 5 years, for instance. So, and this is then what I say about the raindrop. So it comes from the atmosphere, it falls on the paved or the unpaved area. So you can calculate that and you can play with the numbers. So I would like to show a few examples. This is an example from Amsterdam, the city. They ask us to make this water management plan and to make a functional design of rainwater gardens. And we did that together with a landscape architect. So it's a combination between Adrian and me at the moment. So this is the street from Google Maps. As you can see, it's only paved. Very big buildings. No green, no biodiversity. If a raindrops falls here, you can imagine that everything goes directly to the sewage system. So if the sewage system is calculated for this 20 millimeter an hour rain event, you can imagine what happens if we have a 100, or maybe the one they had in Copenhagen, that was 140 millimeters in 1 hour. Yeah, then it will be flooded here. You cannot drive. So that will be in an area as Amsterdam, in this Belmadrid, where there's a lot of companies located, logistical firms, etc. Yeah, that will be a disaster. That will cost money. So if we look here, this is a map of a 60 millimeter in 1 hour rain event. So you have then at some spots 30 centimeters of water. And this is the Belmadrid, so particularly this area, it will have 20 centimeters of water. So that's not desirable, of course. So the municipality asked us to design something what is more green, where you can store water. And also, if you have green in such area, they do not have the money to go out there and irrigate it. So they want to have a design where the trees can survive also longer periods of dry. And what is a challenge in our design is that the road is located on top of a parking lot, an underground parking lot. So that makes, of course, a challenge to what you construct. So what our design was is as follows. So here you see a rain garden. So if water falls on the street level, it flows into here. So this is a bit lowered compared to the street level. You have plants in it and water then. And then it slowly infiltrates into the ground. So it's also good for your groundwater. The sewage system is here. So you also have an additional overflow to the sewage. And also in the middle of the street, we designed trees, etc. But we did not take the big trees. We took more shallow ones, or how do you say, low, not too high. So you still have, you don't have the huge weight on the underground. It's similar here. So this is our design. Yeah, and then we had to look, of course, at the map, where to locate it, how to connect it. So here you might need also a bridge. Here's the parking, etc. So we had to see where it fits in the spatial area. What we did, and what I would recommend you also, I mean, so collect information. First, set an ambition as a municipality. What do you want? Then also make sure you have data about your bottom, or about your soil, about the surface water, about the elevations, about the people around it who live there, etc. And also about the underground structures. That really is a challenge, I know, because every company just digs and puts its own cables. But as a municipality, it's important to know also for your designs, and also to prevent that you're going to dig in somebody else's cables. So, and what I also would recommend to take all the consultation into account. So it's important to talk with people around such a street, how they use it, what they do there, and whether this fits then in the design you prepared. So that's a bit too much technical details. But these are examples of rain gardens along the road, which is good for biodiversity, and it also prevents flooding on your street. This is an example from Arnhem, where we work together with the university, by incident also the university I work for, and to look whether this kind of measures do work. So this is street, these are the gardens, and we want to know how much water can be stored in this rain garden. So for that, together with the students, we let a lot of water pumped it in, we measured, etc. And through this, we could take, you could get an idea of how much infiltration and how much this could this rain gardens work. Yeah, then I would like to say a little bit about Rotterdam and that water square. So Rotterdam in 1340, here's there on top, here's the river Rotte, and dam means of course dike. So this was a dike in the river Rotte. So that's how the name Rotterdam started. And you see, in a few years' time, in our, what we say, our golden age, it's expanded very quickly, yeah. And this was 1900. Well, a lot of labor was, of course, with the port. And nowadays, only here's a little bit green, and there it's a huge big city, and huge port area. So, but if you look at the map, what also Adrian showed, then this is the Netherlands having dikes, having water management issues. But if you remove the dikes, this is the Netherlands. Just guess where my house is located, where I'm working now. I'm living here on the what we call hills in the Netherlands. It's only 50 meters high, but this is the hilltop where my house is located. Yeah, you can imagine what my education is, of course. So yeah, but if you what Adrian told you about the footprint of your city. So Rotterdam also, this is the big port. Here you have all kinds of canals, you have lakes, etc. They define very much in Rotterdam also how you can design your city. Rotterdam is really keen on the green roofs now to lower the heat stress. So this is located next to the Lead Towers. It's the 3 buildings here, and this is a huge roof park. So it's a really nice park on top of buildings. So it's very useful, and the dike construction as well. And this is the square I just showed you other pictures of. So it's also for storing and delaying water. So yeah, so the costs were about 4.5 million. It's of course a lot, but I mean that you should take into account that there are Dutch prices. But here you can see how it works. Yeah? So in the rain, during rain, and in the winter time, you can go skiing or skating. Here it's in the rain time. So these are the typical conditions. This is a once in the 30 times a year you have water like this. Once in a year you have water like this. That helps. And this is another solution where you can store water underground. So you have room here. Particularly in Japan, for instance, they are very good in this. So their city and also Singapore, they have a lot of underground storage. I will not show now this movie, but this is Utrecht. It's also a city in the Netherlands, big city, where you see that if you look at mobility, yeah, so first we of course cycling country, but also it was a long time very normal that you can go by car to the city center. So what we did is that we removed the big canals, the canals you know from Amsterdam. We removed them and replaced them by autoways, so way for streets. And now, because we have more public transport, we also do not want all the cars anymore in the inner cities. So we are returning that streets back to canals. So this is an example of a new canal. Actually, it was a canal, it became a road, and now it's a canal again. And of course, this creates more space for your water. So it also prevents us from this rain events from flooding. And this is a small creek in Enschede. This is a city in the east of the Netherlands, where my father is born, actually. So there you have all kinds of small creeks, small rivers through your city. And also in the past, they just brought that all underground. So that's all through pipes. And nowadays, we want them back because, as you can see, what do you like most? Do you like the water underground, not to see it and have a, or do you want a picture like this? So this is really cool for kids to make an evening walk or daytime. So we call it daylighting the rivers. So we bring them back to daylight. So this is the Roombeek in Enschede, and I think a very nice concept. And of course, this is also for tourists much more attractive. So this is the same creek. And what I also, we just did a study for Kosovo, for a small town, Peja. They built a flood wall along their river. So probably you also have flooding issues with your rivers, but it was only concrete. So this is an example from the Netherlands, where you have the K-wall, you have the wall for flood protection, but you allow trees to grow in it. You allow plants to grow in it, etc. So you get more biodiversity and much more attractive for people to walk. And even, I think still, this is also quite high wall. You could think about lowering like this. It's more attractive to walk along the water instead of on top of it 1 meter above. So it also is mentioned there. So don't turn your back to the water, because water is also very lively and attractive. So these are solutions you could do for that. You could also make more like parks where you can walk. This is an example from, I think it was Singapore, so where you also, so you start living with the water in the middle of the crowded street, city. Yeah, so I have more examples of that. So what I call here like embrace the river, so you can build your new urban areas, for instance. Don't push the water out or bring it in the ground, but start building and living around it. It's much more attractive. This is from Sweden, an example. And a spawn city from China, where they also have that concept. This is from Singapore. So this was before. I think very ugly, in my opinion. Probably very effective, because I mean, you can drain the water very quickly out, but then less attractive. And here you created room for the water to stay, but also a nice park where people can play. So here you have, this was different culture as well. So you want to have playthings there. And the Asians, they often go out in the morning to do the exercises in the park. So you want to facilitate that, for instance. So my message to you is collect your data, store it well. There are also very modern systems. The ADB has, for instance, the SPADE, they call it spatial adaptation system, where you can have a GIS environment where you store all your data, and from that you can make easy decision making. So if you want to know more about that, I can share you also a presentation by email. Develop a strategy. So based on your city, on your area, on your street, what is typical for you, and based on that, make a climate adaptive strategy. Seek for multifunctional. So not only a flood wall, no, make it also biodiversity attractive, for people attractive. And seek a dialogue with your stakeholders, because they know their area best, and you don't want to build something which is not going to be used or is hampering other developments. So this is basically what I would like to tell you. So, Nino, do you allow me to